Bart Simpson sucks at romance. He's absolutely brutal at it, arguably even worse than Moe. I apologize to all you Bart mania folks out there who thinks he's awesome at everything, but let's just call a spade a spade. This kid has dated so many girls over the years, and things always end poorly. Why is this? What is it about Bart's personality that causes all of his romantic relationships to fall apart? Is this a case of the writers torturing him and putting him in no-win situations? Or is this the result of a consistent pattern of behavior? And, out of morbid curiosity, which of these relationships did Bart screw up the worst? Everybody get out your scalpels, because we're doing the post-mortem on Bart's horrific dating history. Now, we could tackle this in series chronological order, seeing how Bart's stories developed over time, but instead, let's go through the various steps and stages of a relationship through Bart's eyes, from flirting to dating, all the way through marriage. See how Bart fares as things get more serious. I will warn you, things will get progressively weirder as we go along. But we'll worry about that later. Let's kick things off with pre-relationship Bart. In the early years of the show, Bart didn't show a ton of interest in dating or romantic relationships, with one notable exception. The writers preferred characterizing him as that 10-year-old fourth grader who thinks girls have cooties or would rather hang out with his friends in his treehouse. The writers are going to take him in bizarre directions later, but we have to remember, this kid is 10, not 13. He's not going to be written like Tina from Bob's Burgers. No one is written like Tina from Bob's Burgers. But we did get a few early glimpses of him brushing up against these kinds of storylines. Unfortunately, most of these involve sabotage. What does Bart do when his best friend falls for the new girl in town and they're making out in his treehouse? He narcs on them to their father, and she gets whisked away to private school. What does Bart do when he falls for the new girl in town, who doesn't see him that way because he is so much younger than her? He sabotages her boyfriend by calling a madman to threaten him with a knife. Or let's say Bart doesn't get along with his teacher and finds out she put in a personal ad in the newspaper. Well, the Bart playbook says to catfish her, obtain racy pictures, and then leave her hanging for their in-person date. Now, some of this behavior should be viewed through the lens of being 10 years old and his existing relationships. He clearly felt threatened by Milhouse and Samantha's relationship, viewing dating as a replacement for what they once had. And for what it's worth, Bart does confess and apologize for what he did. In the case of Mrs. Krabappel, he shows a great deal of ignorance and naivete over how much this prank would hurt her. In this case, instead of confessing, he goes to his family to find a non-humiliating way to resolve things. Both the Milhouse and Mrs. Krabappel situations don't involve Bart's feelings directly, he's not the one with the crush, but they demonstrate how utterly clueless and inconsiderate he can be about others. With Laura, Bart is more self-serving here, but continues his pattern of behavior. He does argue against seeing Jimbo, trying to change her mind, but it seems Bart's style is to go more on the offensive. He hates Jimbo, so he's going to ruin him. Maybe this is just a personal Jimbo problem, that if Laura were dating someone less awful, then Bart would chill the hell out. Still, after the Samantha Stanky episode, I have my doubts. Early on, Bart definitely fell into that school of, if I can't have them, no one can. Before moving on to the next part, I should mention 3 of Bart's crushes on adult characters. There was a substitute teacher, Ms. Barrera, the ex-military badass. He had a small crush on his newest teacher, Ms. Payton, and he took piano lessons from Xenia because he thinks she's hot. The first example led to a bizarre love triangle with Principal Skinner, as Bart kept trying to pull her away, before eventually letting the two of them be happy together. And in the third, he doesn't actually practice the piano, fakes his recital so Xenia can be successful, and then she becomes too busy to teach him anymore. Womp womp. Each of these examples obviously didn't go anywhere because, they're adult women. But there are more examples to throw on the pile of Bart being lazy, messy, and jealous. If we're seeing Bart this manipulative and he hasn't even kissed anyone yet, things are about to get worse before they get better. Alright, so now it's time to talk about those instances where Bart flirts and hangs out with people, but only casually. Maybe one party doesn't like the other in that way, maybe something gets in the way. Think the Laura Powers situation, but with fewer barriers to something actually happening. For example, in season 22, we get Bart on the other side of a one-sided crush. When Skinner is interested in the new music teacher, Bart does him a favor by agreeing to hang out with her 3rd grade daughter Melody, who has a huge crush on him. Bart clearly doesn't like Melody that much, but is willing to humor her to pacify Skinner. Once again, we're seeing more manipulation from Bart, leading Melody on and not being honest with her. Instead, he chooses to break up with her shortly afterward. To take things one step further, we have the case of Greta Wolfcastle, yet another one-sided affair. Unlike Melody, where Bart actively leads her on, this is a lesson in obliviousness. Greta Wolfcastle falls for Bart really bad. Like, really bad. I mean, just look at this. But Bart either cannot or will not recognize how much she is into him. When she wants to hang out at her house, he invites Milhouse to come along. Ugh. When she invites him to go to a school dance, he accepts, but then blows her off when a pranking opportunity arises. Double ugh. He treats Greta so callously that she literally rebounds to dating the dud just to get back at Bart. It's only when he's lost Greta that Bart realizes how dumb he was and starts stalking them, even traveling all the way to Canada to try to win her back. Bart and Milhouse are so terrible that they put Greta off of romance altogether for a few years. We've had a couple instances of what I'd call hot and cold relationships for Bart. First, we have his adventures in Juvenile Hall, when he and Gina Vendetti go on the run. Although confrontational at first, Bart and Gina do open up and develop a bond. Later, Gina even kisses Bart, which is followed up by a swift punch to the face. Let's just say these two fight a lot. But as hot and cold Gina can be, she doesn't hold a candle to Nikki from season 21. Although the two of them don't initially hit it off, they both realize they have a lot in common. After an awesome skateboarding trip around the playground, Nikki asks what they should do next. And Bart decides to go for it, right then and there on top of the slide. Nikki does not take this well. She is horrified, just horrified that this was her first kiss. Or is she? After a big dust-up by her parents, she surprises Bart by hiding in his locker and kisses him back. The whole thing is super confusing for Bart, where one moment she's totally into him, the next moment she's picking a fight. Sometimes she's pushing everyone out of the way so she can perform CPR on him. Bart is so confused that in the end, he tells her that he's giving up on her, and then pathetically calls out, "I love you," after her. Speaking of pathetic, we have Anneke van Houten, Milhouse's cousin visiting from the Netherlands. Once again, Bart falls for an older girl almost instantly. Anneke peer pressures him into vaping, and the two of them loaf around together enjoying their e-cigarettes. Anneke shows very little affection toward Bart. They just hang out, and she gets him to pick up vape refills for her. At the conclusion, as his grand gesture at the airport, Bart tells her that he really doesn't like her anymore, because the only time she's nice to him is when she wants something. And finally, to close this section out, we have this 5th grade girl. She invites him to dance, he wows her with his moves, he wins an award, and the bullies beat him up and break it. She says goodbye forever. For once, this one wasn't Bart's fault, but after the Laura Jimbo prank, let's just say these two are even. Maybe. When it comes to Bart's flirtmances and casual hangouts, we have kind of a mixed bag. We definitely are seeing Bart's jealousness and manipulativeness on display again, with how he leads on Melody and how he stalks Greta and Milhouse. But we're also seeing a large dose of Bart's clumsy obliviousness when it comes to others' feelings. Gina's a very complicated character who actively lied to him about her family, but when she's crying her eyes out as he drones on forever about her family, like, come on dude, connect the dots. With Greta Wolfcastle, Bart is so blindly oblivious that it's almost difficult to sit through. How does Bart not notice how much she likes him? How does he not think about her feelings at all? Greta gathers up a lot of courage to ask him to that dance, and he doesn't even care. His apathy is only cured by his envy. Other instances seem to lean on Bart's lack of agency or understanding of what others want out of a relationship. He obviously can't help it when his dancing partner is turned off after being bullied. Annika just seems to view him as an amusing diversion or someone to do stuff for her. To Bart's credit, however, him actually recognizing that fact is a rare moment of self-awareness from Bart in one of these. With Nikki, she sends so many mixed signals that I think most people at that age would be confused. Unlike other examples, Bart actually seems to be the straightforward one about his intentions, very clear on what he's looking for. This one, I'm not going to blame Bart that much for. He mostly gets a pass here. Honestly, I kind of feel like Bart and Nikki deserve each other because of the way Bart operates in these. As we will see shortly, Bart's version of dating is just as chaotic. We have seen Bart formally dating 6 different girls over the course of the series, but to keep things simple, we're going to cover only 3 of them for now. For this section, we're going to talk about Bart's girlfriends where they never actually went anywhere serious. Let's start out by comparing and contrasting Bart's relationship with Jessica Lovejoy from Season 6 with his relationship with Jenny from Season 20. These episodes are almost perfect mirrors of each other, and how Bart falls for the angelic good girl archetype and desperately tries to convince him he is just like them. With Jessica Lovejoy, it turns out she is no angel and she is able to manipulate Bart into doing whatever she wants. This includes taking the fall for her. Whereas Jenny is the genuine article. She loves to volunteer and cares about others. Bart systematically builds a house of lies regarding his own charity work, even telling her that his father has special needs. Milhouse, who Bart abandoned earlier, finds out about the relationship and drops hints that Bart isn't who he seems. In the end, Bart admits the truth of his pranks and that he is El Barto. Jenny chooses to dump him because the relationship was built entirely on lies. Next up, we have Shauna Chalmers, who coincidentally debuted in the Jenny episode. Shauna was dating Jimbo and had an argument over what movie to see. So Jimbo has Bart chaperone her, demanding that he keep potential suitors away. Bart does the job, and Shauna ends up growing fond of him. Bart comments on how much he likes her side braid, and even takes the fall for her when she gets busted for shoplifting. To thank him, Shauna gets Bart alone and flashes her boobs at him. Wow, they're just like Homer's. Afterward, the two of them start dating in secret, making out at school and at the arcade and at the pool. Shauna likes Bart because he said that she could do so much better than Jimbo, the first person who seemed to want the best for her. In the end, Jimbo finds out and is gonna beat the snot out of Bart. However, Shauna eventually takes Lisa's advice and chooses Shauna instead of either of the guys. She's Shauna. I think with these 3 examples, we see how Bart's sense of image interacts with the type of girls he pursues. He seems to be a big believer in opposites attract, and as America's bad boy, goes for the sweet pastor's daughter or the kind-hearted volunteer. You could make the argument that his toxic relationship with Jessica further strengthened that in his mind. With Shauna, things are reversed, and it's more about Bart being less rough around the edges than Jimbo. It should be noted that, once again, all 3 of these scenarios involve a deception in some way. He fakes being a good boy for both Jenny and Jessica, and keeps both the Jessica and Shauna relationships a secret. The Jessica situation is obviously not as much Bart's fault as many other examples on this list. It's pretty clear how manipulative and awful she is. In the cases of Jenny and Shauna, however, we do see some minor progress on Bart's part, in that he does show an active interest in the things they like, and shockingly, actually compliments them and says nice things to them. I know, Bart actually trying to give a girl genuine advice. That's so crazy. You do get the sense with Jenny that she is inspiring him to try to be a better person. But obviously, faking your entire personality and basing the whole relationship on a lie is not a healthy way to start things. Like, from Jenny's point of view, who even is this guy? I think there was a shot that Jenny could have liked Bart for who he was, if he could have shown how sweet and considerate he could be. None of these three relationships are based in honesty, which seems to be a major trend for Bart. I'm expecting that as things get even more serious, Bart will open up and finally be real with them, right? Right? I don't like where this is going. Well, here we are. We did it. The wedding bells are ringing. So would you believe that Bart has been married, or almost married, 3 different times on the show? And would you believe that 2 of them aren't even in flash forward episodes? Maybe The Simpsons has been on for too long. If you thought Bart getting flashed by a high schooler and then making out with her is weird, well, you should buckle up for what's next. Let's talk about Darcy. In season 18, Bart gets his driver's license and uses it to cruise around and pick up chicks. What else would a 10-year-old do? He picks up Darcy and the two hit it off. They go on multiple dates together, lots of making out in the car, etc. Things are moving pretty fast with Darcy. So quickly that she suggests they should get married. At the courthouse, Bart admits that he's only 10 years old, and Darcy admits that she is pregnant. No, I can assure you, the episode makes it perfectly clear they did not have sex. It is some other guys. Darcy wants her baby to have a father, and that's why she wants to get married. Bart, feeling bad for Darcy, agrees to marry her, and they drive all the way to Utah to get married as minors. Their parents catch up with them and stop the wedding. In the very next season, season 19, we have our second, and thankfully last, of the child marriages. Bart joins the 4-H club and meets Mary Spuckler, daughter of Cletus. She helps him raise a cow, and to save it from the slaughter, Bart offers to give the cow to her. It turns out this is a formal proposal of marriage to the Spucklers. Geez, Bart, you're really bad at meeting the parents, huh? Anyway, he actually goes along with this because he wants to save that cow. And Mary knows what's going on too, but isn't allowed to have any say in the matter. In the end, once again, Marge swoops in, stops the wedding, and saves the cow. Mary Spuckler is the most interesting of Bart's love interests, as she got an entire 3-episode arc. And the wedding episode came first, oddly enough. In season 24, Bart starts self-examining his many failed relationships, and goes to find Mary in New York City to see if someone could like the real him. They reconnect, and Mary sings a song about what a cool fella Bart is. Their romance does not last, however, as Cletus shows up to take her home, and Bart helps her get away. Later that same season, Mary returns to Springfield, and the two rekindle their relationship. And that's the last good thing that happens. Bart promptly starts ignoring her and taking her for granted. When Mary loses a music competition, she looks to Bart to say something supportive about how she did. All Bart can muster is book report talk about the history of lifting spirits. When she urges Bart to come along to dinner with another musician, Bart declines because he's just been through 3 hours of music. And that's basically that. Mary breaks up with Bart, telling him they need to take a break. Bart doesn't even realize they're breaking up until they hug. Bart apologizes and sings a song to win her back, but Mary declines. She says he's a good duck, but they wouldn't last. And finally, we have Jenda, from Bart's many flash-forward episodes. The two of them date during high school and seem to have a stable relationship based on common interests. However, on prom night, when Jenda says she's ready to go all the way with him, Bart surprises her by proposing. Bart reveals he has absolutely no plans for their future, and Jenda dumps him, realizing she has outgrown him. The two briefly get back together when it appears Bart is going to Yale, but that falls apart when he rebuffs her to go help Lisa. It turns out, however, that Bart and Jenda did indeed get married after high school. In Holidays of Future Past, the two have already divorced, and Bart is spending the holidays with her 2 sons. Bart is essentially a deadbeat dad living at the school, and Jenda has remarried. We never see the specifics of Bart and Jenda's marriage and divorce, but can get a good approximation during the sequel episode in season 25. Bart goes to get the Eternal Sunshine treatment to get closure from Genda. In his vision, Genda's husband leaves her, they get back together, and Bart moves in. But then Bart stops paying attention to her talking to him, she starts texting during their convo about what a jerk he is, and he comments on her age. Bart and Genda separate again, and this helps Bart realize that he is completely over her. And then, I presume, Bart just dies alone, I guess. So as you can see, this entire section is one giant mess. He had 3 weddings, and all of them are cuckoo bananas. Once again, we're seeing more of Bart's relationships wrapped up in some kind of deception. Darcy and Bart are both hiding aspects about themselves, and then run off to elope. Bart is trying to save a cow with Mary, and then helps evade her dad in New York. With both Mary and Genda, we're seeing Bart's callousness and indifference on display. How much he takes them for granted and doesn't get his act together. This section is interesting though, because it says something about Bart that I hadn't expected. The joke about some men is how afraid of commitment they are, that they want to keep things light and breezy. But in actuality, Bart's the exact opposite. He's the type who rushes too quickly into commitments. He's gonna marry Darcy to be the father of her child, he's gonna marry Mary to save a cow, he proposes to Genda on their prom night. Bart's the kind of person who really likes the idea of committing to someone, but doesn't want to commit to the follow-through part. He doesn't want to get his life together or be a reliable husband to Genda. He probably has no idea what he's going to do after marrying Darcy or Mary. Even in other casual relationships, it's clear that he gets in over his head too quickly. I think that's the fundamental problem with Bart and why he fails so much at romance. Bart's one of those who only loves the idea of being in a relationship. His narcissism and his laziness and his apathy stops him from actually having a fulfilling relationship with anyone. He's all image and no substance. I don't know how intentional this all was from the writer's perspective. It probably isn't. But there's a strong argument that his parents' marriage significantly affected Bart's view on what goes into a relationship. Bart saw this wonderful love story of these soulmates finding each other in high school. It's no wonder why Bart rushes into these marriages, or would view Genda as the one. But he has also watched his dad repeatedly take his mom for granted, have these big blow-ups and reconciliations. Bart definitely inherited a lot of his father's laziness, sure, but Homer also instilled the lesson that Bart can be lazy about relationships and get away with it. Things always seem to work out for Homer, but they didn't for Bart. Unlike his sister, Bart doesn't have the critical eye where he might learn something from his parents' mistakes. I think that's the missing piece of Bart's difficulties in dating. Bart is an unfortunate combination of being somewhat closed off and emotionally distant, while also picking up many of Homer's bad habits. It's a recipe for disaster. I have to admit, I have never found Bart's romantic storylines very satisfying to watch over the years. Watching someone fail over and over again can be a little exhausting after a while. I think everyone would agree that Bart totally blew it with a lot of these girls. There was usually some stupid thing he would do that would irrevocably ruin the relationship. If we're gonna name an all-time worst example, I think it's either Genda or Mary, with Greta a close third. Considering he had 2 kids with Genda and still didn't get his act together, that falls somewhere in the Kirk Van Houten tier of failure. His relationship with Mary was much lower stakes, but she asked for the bare minimum of emotional support, and he couldn't even do that for her. Come on. And then he lets her go off to dinner with this guy. This episode is terrible. I've been pretty critical of Bart during this analysis, but I think we should also acknowledge that the writers have thrown a lot of crap at this kid over the years. Remember, he's 10 years old, and we were all kinda idiots about crushes at that age. Attraction can work in mysterious ways, and Bart has the extra layer of the writers pointing him in different directions. For whatever reason, the writers seem to love pairing up Bart with older girls and adult women in particular. Even Mary, who I thought was Bart's age, is canonically 13. The writers have had to come up with 30 plus seasons of content, and I think it's led to Bart being placed into storylines where he doesn't really belong. Clearly they wanted to use Bart as a vehicle to show off those funny foibles of dating. They've put him in enough scenarios that many folks are going to relate to one of them. We can laugh and cringe and think about our own experiences. As someone who was a legendarily oblivious kid, I definitely wince when watching some of those Greta Wolfcastle scenes. I think it's pretty telling that, unlike Lisa, Bart has never finished an episode of The Simpsons still dating someone. Never. And no, I'm not counting that Treehouse of Horror. I didn't want to talk about that time Bart got his Rigelian rocks off. Ugh. It's clear that Bart romance plots are all about the messy journey, not the warm and fuzzy destination. You all know me by now and how much I want characters to have their happy endings, and obviously, I hope Bart would get it together in the future. But in the meantime, I kinda like that this seems to be Bart's Achilles heel. That Bart has many good qualities socially and is able to make platonic connections easily. But this is just something that he struggles at. Everyone has that thing that they could use some work at. This is Bart's. Maybe Bart has the opposite problem as Lisa, that he's been hanging out with his friends in the present timeline for so long that he doesn't seem to know how to deal with the future. Hopefully Bart will figure things out someday. I would like to see someday another flash forward episode for Bart that isn't a total bummer. The writer's approach has definitely been questionable at times, but I like what they've revealed about his character. Bart Simpson may be a clown, but he's a relatable clown. Let us all try to avoid being like the boy.